In 1899, German archaeologists made an extraordinary discovery in the ruins of Babylon, a monumental gate. But this was no ordinary gate. This masterpiece, clad in gleaming blue bricks, rose to an impressive 8 stories and was adorned with over 500 figures of dragons and bulls. Known as the Ishtar Gate, its history holds a mystery rarely taught in classrooms. This gate was not intended to welcome travelers, but to seal away something dangerous, something the Sumerians feared could ruin their civilization if unleashed. The dragon that adorned its tiles was not merely decorative. The Babylonians called it Mushushu, the raging serpent. It was a creature with the head of a serpent, the body of a lion, the talons of an eagle, and scales that gleamed brightly like bronze. Ancient texts describe it as the protector of Marduk, Babylon's chief god. However, this is where the narrative takes a disturbing turn. Throughout the centuries, multiple Mesopotamian sources, though independent, concur in describing this same creature, with the same characteristics, the same behavior, and the same terror it inspired. And they all agree on one thing: it was real, it was alive, and someone had to build a prison strong enough to hold it. If you're interested in the forbidden history that mainstream archaeology refuses to address, subscribe. Every week, I cover ancient mysteries, forbidden archaeology, and the stories they don't want you to ask about. Now, let's talk about what the Sumerians truly feared. To understand what the Ishtar Gate actually contained, we have to go back 4,000 years before Babylon existed. Back to Sumer, the first civilization, the people who invented writing, built the first cities, and created the first legal codes. But herein lies the difference between the Sumerians and any other ancient culture. They did not claim that their knowledge came from human innovation, but from the gods, specifically from beings they called the Anunnaki. The Anunnaki were not a metaphor. The Sumerians described them in great detail as physical beings between 2 and 2.5 meters tall. They descended from the heavens in great ships. They built cities and taught humans agriculture, mathematics, and astronomy. But they also brought something else: genetic experimentation. The Sumerian creation myth, the Enuma Elish, describes how the Anunnaki mixed their essence with that of primitive humans to create workers, slaves, us. Now, most scholars consider it mythology, symbolic narrative. But the Sumerians didn't write myths like other cultures. Their texts were records, administrative documents, king lists, accurate astronomical charts. When they described the Anunnaki, they wrote about them the same way they wrote about grain stores and water rights, as facts, not allegories. And one of those events involved creatures, not just the Anunnaki themselves, but beings they controlled. Beasts that guarded sacred places and creatures genetically modified for specific purposes. And the most feared of all these creatures was the dragon serpent. It was the prototype for all the dragon myths that arose throughout human history. Let's fast forward to 1900 BC. Babylon is flourishing. It is becoming the dominant power in Mesopotamia. King Hammurabi, famous for his legal code, is expanding the city and consolidating religious power. Marduk, once a minor agricultural deity, is being elevated to the status of supreme god. And with Marduk comes his sacred animal, the Mushushu. This is where things get interesting. All the other sacred animals in Mesopotamian religion were familiar species: lions, bulls, eagles, real animals. But the Mushushu was different. No one had ever seen anything like it in nature. It had a snake's head with a horn protruding from its skull. Its body was covered in scales, but it walked upright on its hind legs like a dinosaur. Its forelegs ended in lion's claws. Its hind legs were eagle's talons, and its tail was a scorpion's stinger. Conventional archaeology claims it was a composite creature, a symbolic fusion of powerful animals. But then why are all depictions of the Mushushu identical? The same proportions, the same scale pattern, the same posture. 2,000 years ago, artists from different cities and dynasties drew the exact same creature. No variations, no artistic interpretations, the same animal. As if they were working from a reference, as if they had seen it. And here's what should make you uncomfortable. In 1918, a German cryptozoologist named Willy Ley published research comparing the Mushushu to dinosaur fossils being discovered at the time, specifically the iguanodon, a bipedal herbivore from the Cretaceous period. The skeletal structure matched, the posture too. The texture of the scales described in Babylonian texts matched fossilized skin impressions found in Mongolia. But dinosaurs went extinct 65 million years ago, so either the Babylonians had access to paleontology 4,000 years before modern science, or they were depicting something that still existed in their time, something they had seen, something they feared enough to build a massive gate to contain it. For 2,000 years, the Ishtar Gate stood. Empires rose and fell. Babylon was conquered by Persians, Greeks, and Romans. The city was abandoned. The gate collapsed and was buried by sand. The story of the Mushushu faded into legend. By the time Islam spread through the region, locals believed the ruins were cursed and haunted. No one dared to excavate. When German archaeologist Robert Koldewey arrived in 1899, he wasn't looking for dragon prisons, but for the Hanging Gardens, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Instead, he found the Ishtar Gate, buried under 12 meters of sand and rubble. The excavation lasted 18 years, and the more they unearthed, the less sense it made from a conventional perspective. The gate wasn't merely decorative. It was structurally reinforced more than anything else in Babylon. The walls were 6 times thicker than the city's outer defenses. The bricks were glazed with a specific cobalt blue pigment that required temperatures exceeding 1,000 degrees Celsius for its production, a technique that wouldn't be replicated in Europe until the Renaissance. And the entire structure was aligned with celestial coordinates, specifically with the Draco constellation, the Dragon constellation. But here's the detail that's usually hidden in academic journals. Behind the door, Koldewey found a system of tunnels, deep ones, complex, with cameras showing evidence of extreme heat damage, burn marks, molten stone, and enormous iron chains embedded in the walls. Chains thick enough to hold something weighing several tons. The German team photographed everything, documented it, and then the records were classified and locked away in the archives of the Pergamon Museum. Most of these accounts have never been made public. Let's talk about what the Babylonians actually believed about the Mushushu. Not the sanitized version in museums, but the authentic accounts. In the Enuma Elish, the Babylonian creation epic, the dragon serpent is not only Marduk's pet, but also the offspring of Tiamat, the primordial goddess of chaos. Tiamat was described as an enormous sea serpent who spawned an army of monsters to fight against the lesser gods. Marduk killed Tiamat, tore her body in 2, and used her corpse to create the heavens and the earth. But he did not kill all of her offspring. The Mushushu survived. Marduk captured him, tamed him, and forced him into his service. The creature became a symbol of Marduk's power, proof that he could control the forces of chaos. But control did not mean trust. All depictions of the Mushushu show him chained, immobilized, collared. He was not a loyal companion. He was a prisoner. And there is a disturbing detail in the Babylonian ritual texts. Each year during the Akitu festival, the Babylonian New Year celebration, priests performed a ceremony at the Ishtar Gate. They recited incantations, made blood offerings, and reinforced the seals. These were literal magical seals carved into the gate's foundation, designed to prevent anything from passing through. Modern scholars interpret this as symbolic, a ritualistic recreation of cosmic order over chaos. But what if it wasn't symbolic? What if those priests knew something was down there? What if the seals weren't metaphorical but functional? What if the real reason the gate was never completely destroyed, even when Babylon fell, was because breaking it would unleash something humanity wasn't ready for? Throughout Mesopotamian history, there are rumors of the dragon appearing when it shouldn't. In 2000 BC, during the reign of Shulgi of Ur, a cuneiform tablet describes a creature emerging from the Euphrates River near Babylon. With a serpent's head, it walked upright, and its scales gleamed like polished bronze. It killed 12 soldiers before disappearing back into the water. The king ordered the area sealed off and public access prohibited. In 1200 BC, during the Assyrian conquest of Babylon, King Tukulti-Ninurta I recorded an encounter with the beast of the Gate of Marduk. His army was encamped near the Ishtar Gate when several sentries reported seeing something enormous moving in the underground chambers. Tukulti-Ninurta ordered his men to avoid the area. He left offerings at the gate and withdrew his troops 3 days earlier than planned. A conquering king, terrified, abandoned a strategic position. But the story that should most concern you dates from 539 BC, when Cyrus the Great of Persia conquered Babylon. He issued a very specific decree. The Ishtar Gate was to remain intact, guarded at all times. All other important structures in Babylon were reused or dismantled for building materials, but not the gate. Cyrus, a king who felt no loyalty to either Marduk or the Babylonian religion, ordered the gate to be protected. Why? What information did he possess that allowed him to disregard standard military protocol? A fragment of Persian text recovered from Persepolis in the 1930s refers to the serpent of ancient times, which was supposedly held captive beneath Babylon. The text warns against breaking the blue seal, lest the spirals of Tiamat's last son rise again to devour the sun. This was not Babylonian propaganda. This was a Persian warning, written by conquerors who had every reason to scoff at Babylonian superstition. They didn't scoff. They reinforced the guards. Now, let's talk a little about what mainstream archaeology doesn't usually address. The Babylonian dragon wasn't just a Mesopotamian phenomenon. The same creature, or a disturbingly similar one, appears in cultures that had no contact with Babylon. In ancient China, dragons were depicted as serpentine creatures with 4 legs, scales, and the ability to control the weather. The Chinese didn't call them myths, they called them historical creatures that once walked the earth but retreated to hidden places. In Mesoamerica, the Aztecs and the Maya worshipped Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, a dragon-like being described as having scales, walking upright, and possessing divine knowledge. The descriptions match almost perfectly with the Mushashu. Same bipedal stance, same serpent head, same divine association. The Maya had no contact with Mesopotamia, so how did they describe the same creature? In medieval Europe, dragon slaying wasn't just folklore, it was documented history. St. George, St. Michael, and countless knights and saints recorded battles against enormous reptilian creatures. Cities preserved records of dragon attacks well into the 16th century. The city of Lucerne, Switzerland, has a medieval chronicle describing a dragon slain in 1499. The creature's description matches that of the Mushushu, a serpent's head, a scaly body, and 4-legged. The inhabitants kept what they claimed were its claws in the town hall. These claws still exist. Modern analysis identifies them as belonging to an extinct species of giant monitor lizard. But monitor lizards don't reach the size described in the chronicle. Something is missing from the official story. And then there's the 1910 excavation, a detail that has been erased from most historical records. A joint British-German team, funded by private sponsors, attempted to fully excavate the chamber system beneath the Ishtar Gate. They reached a depth of 3 levels. Then, the expedition was abruptly suspended without official explanation. The lead archaeologist, Dr. Heinrich Zimmerd, returned to Berlin and resigned his academic post. He never published his findings. His personal journals were confiscated. And, in a private letter to a colleague, he wrote only this: "Some doors are sealed for a reason. We were foolish to think ourselves wiser than the ancients." World War I broke out. The Middle East became a battleground, and Babylon, located in present-day Iraq, found itself at the very heart of the conflict. British forces occupied the region in 1917. They used archaeological sites as military outposts, including the Ishtar Gate, or what remained of it. Most of the gate had been dismantled and sent to Berlin for the Pergamon Museum, but the foundations and underground chambers remained standing. A classified British military report, declassified in 2004, documents an incident that occurred at the Babylon site in November 1917. A detachment of soldiers was using the ruins as a supply depot. On November 23rd, at approximately 2 a.m., several men reported hearing noises coming from underground, scraping, movement, and a low-frequency vibration that caused them toothaches. Captain R.H. Thornton, the commanding officer, ordered an investigation. 3 men descended into the chamber system with oil lamps. Only one returned. He was incoherent. He kept repeating, "Eyes like bronze, and he's still down there." Captain Thornton sealed the entrance with rubble and relocated the entire detachment. His report to command included a formal request to demolish the site completely. The request was denied. Instead, the area was declared a restricted zone. No archaeological work or excavations were carried out, and no explanation was given to the public. This restriction remained in place until 1978, when Saddam Hussein decided to rebuild Babylon. He considered it a propaganda project to establish his lineage with the ancient kings. But Saddam's engineers encountered the same problem as the British. The underground chambers could not be mapped accurately. Equipment malfunctioned, and workers refused to enter certain sections. There were reports of illness and hallucinations. One engineer claimed to have seen something moving in the deepest tunnel, something large and imposing, with eyes that reflected the flashlight beams like an animal's. Saddam's solution was, unsurprisingly, brutal. He ordered the deepest chambers filled with concrete and permanently sealed. Construction records show that over 200 tons of concrete were poured into the foundation area where the Ishtar Gate once stood. This wasn't restoration, it was burial. What was he sealing down there? What did his engineers find that made filling ancient archaeological treasures with concrete seem like the safest option? Following the 2003 invasion of Iraq, U.S. forces established Forward. The Babylon operational base was located directly on the archaeological site. The military presence remained until 2004. During that time, several incidents were documented in which soldiers reported strange phenomena. Night vision equipment detected thermal signatures that did not correspond to human profiles. Motion sensors were triggered in sealed areas. A persistent, low-frequency hum was causing headaches and nausea to personnel stationed near the ancient foundations. A private security contractor speaking on condition of anonymity in 2009 claimed his unit was tasked with investigating the sealed chambers in December 2003. They used ground-penetrating radar to map what lay beneath the concrete. The radar showed a huge void, and something within that void reflected the signal in ways that suggested metallic composition, biological matter, or both. The investigation was classified above its clearance level. His unit was relieved of duty within 48 hours. He never received an explanation. But we know from public records that in 2004, the U.S. military conducted soil analysis around the Babylon site. They were supposedly conducting tests to detect chemical weapons. Instead, they found anomalous radiation signals. These were neither military-grade nor modern. The isotopic decay pattern suggested extreme antiquity, thousands of years old. The samples were sent to secret facilities for further analysis. The results were never published. In 2006, UNESCO issued a formal condemnation of the damage done to Babylon during the occupation. Hidden in the technical appendices of that report is a curious detail. UNESCO inspectors observed unauthorized excavations in the restricted foundation zone and structural instability, suggesting recent disturbance of the subsoil. Someone had been digging where Saddam had sealed the chambers, where the British had warned against going, where the ancient Babylonians built their dragon prison. In 2009, international archaeological teams were finally allowed to return to Babylon. The site was in ruins. Military occupation had destroyed the surface ruins. But the foundation area, the zone around the ancient Ishtar Gate, showed a different kind of deterioration. The concrete poured by Saddam displayed enormous stress fractures, cracks wide enough to fit a human arm through. These cracks extended from a central point to a great depth, as if something had forcefully pushed outward. The Iraqi State Board of Antiquities and Heritage hired structural engineers to assess the damage. Their report, partially leaked in 2011, concluded that the foundation instability was not caused by military vehicles or bombing. The stress patterns didn't match the external forces. Instead, the damage suggested internal pressure. Something beneath the concrete was trying to force its way through. Engineers recommended either excavating and reinforcing the ground completely or abandoning it altogether. Iraq opted for a third option. In 2013, they built a new structure directly on top of the old foundations, a visitor center. The building permits demonstrate that this is no ordinary visitor center. The building features reinforced steel foundations driven 18 meters deep into the bedrock, seismic monitoring equipment, and security systems far exceeding those needed to protect tourists from theft. The building not only sits on the former site of the gate, but it's also compressing something beneath it. Official sources are silent about what lies there. No full excavation or comprehensive study has been conducted. The deepest chambers remain sealed with concrete and steel. Now, quite literally, a building is pressing down on them. It's almost as if the modern Iraqi government knows what the ancient Babylonians knew. There are some things that are better kept secret than understood. This is what keeps me up at night. No ancient culture that described dragons treated them as fantasy. They treated them as history, as real creatures that once existed but disappeared. The Sumerians said the Anunnaki brought them. The Chinese said they took refuge in hidden places. The Europeans said they were hunted to extinction. But what if they didn't go extinct? What if the last one was captured, imprisoned under Babylon, and guarded for 4,000 years by people who understood what would happen if he escaped? Think of the effort that would entail. Building an 8-story high gate, aligning it with celestial coordinates, performing annual rituals for centuries, sealing chambers with chains and incantations, conquering kings refusing to tear it down, modern governments pouring concrete and building structures to reinforce it. That's not superstition. This demonstrates the continuity of a purpose across millennia. Different civilizations, different religions, different governments all agree on one thing: whatever is down there must not get out. The Mushhush Shu was not decorative, it was a warning. The Ishtar Gate was not a monument to the glory of Marduk. It was a seal, the gate of a prison, built to contain the last vestige of Tiamat's monstrous offspring, the dragon serpent that predates human civilization, the creature the Anunnaki created or brought with them from wherever they came. And if the ancient texts are correct, if the warnings carved into the foundation stones are literal, that creature still lies down there, alive, waiting, resisting seals that weaken with each century. Why is this important? Because the Ishtar Gate isn't the only ancient structure built to contain something. The pyramids of Giza have sealed chambers that have never been opened. The Temple Mount in Jerusalem sits atop a foundation riddled with unexplored tunnels. Göbekli Tepe, in Turkey, was deliberately buried by its builders 10,000 years ago. Someone wanted to hide it. All these sites share the same characteristics: astronomical alignment, reinforced foundations, warnings in various languages, and access restrictions imposed by modern governments. What if the ancients weren't primitive? What if they knew things we're only just beginning to rediscover? What if they waged wars against creatures we now call myths? They captured the survivors. And did they build prisons strong enough to hold them for thousands of years? What if those prisons begin to fail? The Ishtar Gate is gone. Its fragments are scattered in museums. The foundations remain sealed. For now. But every year the concrete cracks a little more. The ground shifts, and somewhere deep beneath the ruins of Babylon, something ancient stirs. The Babylonians knew what it was. The Persians reinforced the seals. The British tried to destroy the site, Saddam tried to bury it. The Americans investigated and categorized the findings, and they all came to the same conclusion. Some doors must remain closed. Some prisons must never be opened. Certain creatures from the Anunnaki era must remain where the ancients left them, chained, sealed, and forgotten forever. The serpent-dragon of Babylon is not merely a myth, it is a warning. The gate they built was not designed to keep us out, but to contain it within. If you've made it this far, you are exactly the person who needs to know what I have in store for next week. The Anunnaki left behind not only dragons, but also astonishing technology. Ancient texts describe devices with remarkable accuracy, yet modern archaeology refuses to acknowledge their existence. I am examining the evidence they don't want you to discover. Subscribe. Forbidden history isn't found in dusty libraries. It's buried beneath our feet. Someone really doesn't want us to unearth it.